and welcome to our session at DynamicsCon. Our session is about how to integrate Business Central with Power Platform, and hope you guys will enjoy it. First, let me introduce ourselves. I'm Tharanga Chandrasekara, Business Central MVP for the past 6 years and working at Theta as a Business Central lead consultant. And today my partner is Wagner.
Hey everyone.
He's an Azure MVP for past 5 years and working as an integration practice lead at Theta. We've been doing this session for the past couple of years, especially regarding integration with Business Central. However, this is the first time we are presenting at DynamicsCon, and we are really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And the first time that you are also presenting specific about integrating with Power Platform, so quite excited about that.
Yeah, and just to remind you that we have a Q&A session at the end of this session, so please have your questions ready for that. And Wagner, shall we go to the next slide on the agenda?
Yes, so let's start.
Yeah, let me go through the agenda for the session. First, we would like to discuss why we need to have integration and what are the benefits of it. So Wagner is going to talk about that. And then we are going to talk about the integration between Business Central and the Dataverse. The third one is the integration part, where we think that you will be very much interested in, where we'll show you a complete demo on how to set up virtual entities and how to integrate with Business Central. And after the demo, Wagner will talk about other options available apart from the virtual entities. Finally, we'll give you a reference where you can start reading and start your journey with the Dataverse and the virtual entities.
Okay.
Now, I will hand over to Wagner to take you through the first part of the session. Okay. And over to you, Wagner.
Thanks, Tharanga. So I think it's a question that's why everyone is asking, why integration on a Dynamics conference, right? But we see a lot that these systems, like either Dynamics 365, BC, even FinOps, don't exist by itself. It always needs to connect to other systems. And during the course of both our work in our presentations, we identified as like top 3 signs that you're actually thinking that you probably need integration. So the first one is like you're spending too much time on manual data entries. Your systems or your users are actually doing what we call swivel chair integration. You type in here, you're entering all the data, and then instead of having something that connects the two systems and move data around, you have to pretty much like move to another place, like physically go and key in another system. That usually leads you to very inaccurate data across the systems. And you started to never trust your data, right? You don't know that if the information that you have is accurate enough, and you're starting to second guess your business process and your business decisions. And that also leads to very inefficient processes. One thing that I see right now here in New Zealand, we are in lockdown, right? So I ordered something on a company that was planning to take it to my work address because I was there most of the time. And then now I'm going to be locked in New Zealand or on my house for another 2 weeks. I wanted to change my address to move that to here. If you have that swivel chat integration that we talked about between me talking to customer services and they keying on the system, then maybe going to the other system, there is a whole lot of other places where things can go wrong. And pretty sure that what's going to happen is my package is going to stay in the office waiting for me to arrive instead with me when I actually need that, right? So those are like 3 top signs that you actually need integration. And if you achieve a good level of integration, what are the benefits that you're going to take out of that? So why should you be actually investing on integration? First one is actually saves time. Just on that example, you're going to have the person doing one job instead of doing the job 2 or 3 times again, which leads to much more efficient processes since the data is spread throughout the system as it needs and is supporting the business processes that you have, right? And your data is much more visible. So if you needed to do any kind of decision or snaps decisions and you needed to look into data to have to give you confidence, that means you're able to do that because the data is visible on all the systems and is much more consistent. And finally, and probably the most important, is making sure that all of that happens, you actually keeping up with the client needs, right? So on my case, I would be like a very happy customer that once I talk to customer service in the next 2 days, my delivery was coming to my place instead of going somewhere else. So now I'm going to pass back to Tharanga, and we're going to be talking about D365 BC and Dataverse. But maybe start with the first question, Tharanga. Why Dataverse?
Okay, that's a good question. So if you look at the today's business world, the data is everything. It's vital for business to like have their data where they can access easily. Business has different applications to handle different business processes, right? But each of these app systems need to communicate with each other to pass information. Otherwise, we will lose the value of those business applications. And in some cases, multiple applications might be using the same set of data. You might have application in the customer side where it handles the customer orders, and one application might be handling the customer inquiries. But both of these applications have something in common, which is that it's using the customer dataset. In old days, most of the applications like this would be having its own data set and then do a manual synchronization. With this approach, developers need to create custom APIs or some other method to export and import data from the storages. Some of the time, each of these applications might be using different data models. So developers might have to understand the different data models in order to do a simple change, and that took a lot of time and also the money. But with with Dataverse, these issues have been resolved completely. Since Dataverse can be used as a centralized data storage, multiple applications can share the same dataset without any issues. Plus, to make things much simpler, it has already have out of the box schema for the most of the entities that businesses need regularly. Still, if a business or the developer is required to create a new table, that's also possible. And if he or she wants to extend the table with new fields, that's also possible, which makes Dataverse flexible and very much extendable. Since data is stored in a one single place, it is easy to run reports, dashboards, export data into multiple analytical tools, and also it have a very good security model that can secure your data. That's why I think Dataverse is a perfect place to store data for modern business applications. So, Wagner, can we go to next slide where we can talk about integration scenarios? The main integration scenarios that I can say is Dynamics 365 is the best example. Because by default, Dynamics 365, customer engagement, sales, HR, those apps use Dataverse as its backend database. Therefore, Business Central can easily integrate with all these apps using multiple integration methods. If the salesperson in the field changed a customer address, as Wagner mentioned previously, that data needs to flow into Business Central for order processing. Or the customer sales app, the Dynamics 365 sales app, create a sales order that needs to go into Business Central for further processing. These kind of integrations can easily achieve since the data is stored in the Dataverse. In the old days, we had like a lot of trouble when we try to integrate a sales app to Business Central or the Dynamics NAV. Wagner is going to talk about these soon, but let's quickly talk about bespoke apps as well. Even for the bespoke apps, I have seen like many developers now start to work with Dataverse as a data storage. This enables integration quite easy, and sometimes as a Business Central developers like me, we don't even have to write much code to get the integration up and running. As an example, we have few projects in our company, which is in flight these days, that we are using Power Apps to create custom apps, and then all these data is stored in the Dataverse, but the functionalities related to finance is handled by Business Central, which allows us to save a lot of time because the Business Central as a financing system is like very strong. And we have built this integration using a couple of few integration options. And I think, Wagner, you are next going to talk about those, right?
Yes. So let's talk about some options to integrate with Dataverse. I think is the newest, but probably the most exciting from that is the idea of using virtual entities or virtual tables. So the idea on that one is actually having a way to expose data from an external application, in this case, Business Central, into Dataverse. So you can have pretty much a two-way integration, and those systems would be working seamlessly, right? But sharing the same entity details from a table point of view, and maybe able to do all the changes. The other way to do is when virtual entities is not a good approach for some reason, then you still can still back up into standard connector. That is the standard old CRM connector, right, Tharanga?
Yep. We did like a couple of sessions like a few years ago.
Yes, we talked about that one a lot.
A lot.
The idea of the standard connector is a scheduled synchronization mechanism that you have between BC and in this case, Dataverse or the old versions of Dynamics CRM. And finally, if those two are not be able to work because they are pretty much configuration only, you can always back up into enterprise integration. And we're going to be talking about what is the options for enterprise integration that we have. But before that, let's talk a little bit about virtual entities, right? So what is the idea of a virtual entity? As I said before, is representing external data as a table. In this case, represent an external data that exists on BC into Dataverse, right? But when you're doing that, you're actually not replicating data, so the data don't physically exist on the two systems. And that's going to give us a lot of advantage, as you're going to see really soon. It's really based on easy configuration. You don't have to create any custom code for that to happen, and Tharanga is going to be demonstrating that really soon. And supports the full CRUD for you. So I think as before, virtual entities was only available for read-only entities. So you could see data in one system, but you could only change in the other one. Now you have the full ability to do the create, updates, and deletes in any of those systems, and that is going to be replicated or is going to be appearing on the other system, exactly because you don't have a data replication. And because you don't have data replication, that's extremely fast, and Tharanga is going to be showing that. Just before we go to the demo, let's talk a little bit about some design considerations, right? When should I be using, what are the scenarios that I should be using virtual entity? Like the first one for me is like when you need real-time synchronization. And because of the data doesn't change, is not copied between systems, right? That synchronization can be really fast, and you're going to see that really soon. The second thing to take in consideration from design is data only exists on the master. So whoever owns that table, that's where the data is going to be reside. And that's bring you some things to take in consideration when working on that, especially when you're trying to use charts or dashboards inside the Dataverse. Those entities are not be able to be used by that because the data is just not there. What you have is an API behind the scenes pointing to BC, right? And I probably would be bold enough to say that it's not there yet. Maybe that's something that is going to be worked on. I'm not sure. But the other thing that is quite important is because the data doesn't exist on Dataverse, the flows or the triggers that could initialize flows also wouldn't happen because the change in the actual data happens, in this case, on BC. And right now, you don't have support for auditing of change tracking, exactly because the data doesn't exist on Dataverse itself. And you don't have access support to create binaries yet. Okay. Finally, the entity must fit the Dataverse model. And in this case, the reason we're talking about that is Dataverse has a pretty specific way, for example, to create the primary keys. And you needed to make sure that your data model or your table on the other system supports that, having like a GUID as the primary key. But I think it's like enough of us talking about it. Let's try to take a look about how all of that is going to work. So I'm going to pass that to a demo that Tharanga just recorded a little while ago. So let's take a look at how that would be working.
Welcome to the demo. In here, I have a couple of environments open. The first one is Business Central, and the second one is Power Platform Admin Center, which is the admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. And third one is the Power Apps portal, which is make.powerapps.com. And third one is my sales trial, which I spin up for this demo. Before I do anything, I need to install a solution into Dataverse, which will allow Dataverse to connect to Business Central. So for that, I go to appsource.microsoft.com and search for Business Central virtual tables. Make sure it's not virtual entities, it's virtual table. And once I have that, I'm going to click get it now and then provide the information Microsoft is requesting. And once I do that, it will redirect me to admin.powerplatform.com. In here, I have multiple environments, so I need to select which environment I need to use. So I'm selecting sales trial and agree to terms and conditions, and then click install. Once you click install, it will show you the progress of the solution installation, and sometimes it takes 5 to 10 minutes. So for that, I have cut the demo a little bit short, so because we don't have much time to wait for that. And after waiting for a couple of seconds, you might need to refresh the page, and then you will see the solution, the status will change into installed. Once the solution is successfully installed in the Dataverse, you need to go back to Power Apps portal, which is the make.powerapps.com, and then select the environment that you want to work with. In here, I'm going to select my sales trial. That's the one that I use to install the solution. And then go to Dataverse and click table. Before that, let me go back to Business Central and do a small configuration change. In here, I need to search for Active Directory applications. And on the record that you have in here, you need to do the enable. Make sure you do not change the client ID or anything like that in here. Just enable that. And save the record. And then go back to Power Apps. And then select the filters to all and then search for Business Central. You will see a couple of tables available like once you search the Business Central. The table that we are interested in is the Business Central Virtual Data Source Configuration. So I go into that table. And in here, I'm doing go to data and then select Business Central and do the edit record. It will open up the record, and in here, I want to give the name that, select the company that I want to select. So I'm going to say this is the company I want to work with the virtual entities, and do a save and record. And then go back to tables. Now we have point the Dataverse to the correct company in Business Central. The next thing we want to do is we want to select the APIs. For that, I'm searching Business Central and go to available Business Central tables and do the data. And this will take a couple of seconds as well, because now Dataverse is connecting to Business Central and trying to find out what are all the available APIs. And once you have that, the one I'm interested in, the customer. So I go and select that and do an edit record. This will take me to the customer record, the API, and in here I want to make it visible so that I can work with and I can use it as a data source, and do a save and close in here. It will take a couple of seconds. Let's go back to the APIs. So these are all the APIs available to work with within Business Central, and if you expose your custom APIs, it will be available here as well. Now that has been successfully enabled, and I'm going back to table, but this time I need to do a clean refresh. Once the window is reloaded, I want to search for customer, because that's the entity that we enabled for. And you will see that the name is from the name itself, you will understand that it's from the Business Central, and then you select the customer. And this will show you all the available fields. Then I will go to data in here. Now it's going back to Business Central and trying to find out what are the available customers in Business Central. And let's see, I think we should have like 5 customers. Yep, we have around 5 customers in here. So first I will add a record. To show you in a much better view, I'll put Business Central in side by side. And in here I'm typing something as a display name. And I do a save, come back to BC and do a refresh. Yep, within a couple of, not within a couple of seconds, split of a second, you will see the customer is appearing. Now I do a modify to that customer. And do I save? Yep, and it did work as well. If I go ahead and delete a record in here and go back to Business Central and refresh it, you can see that that record get deleted from the BC as well. Now we saw that any record that we're deleting or modifying or creating on the Dataverse side is reflecting on the Business Central. Let's try to do the same thing, but the other way around. Let me put the Power Apps portal and Business Central side by side, and then go to Power Apps portal, select the table type to all, and then search for customer. I'm trying to get into the customer API that I exposed previously as a data source. So I open that one and it shows me all the columns, and then I'm going to the data tab. It brings me back all the customers available in Business Central. So if you can see, all the customer records are similar. Then I'm going to create a new customer in here to find out whether the creating new record is working fine with the virtual entities. I create a customer in Business Central and give it a name. I'm going to give a name as the Dataverse customer. And then customer record gets saved, and then I go back to Power Apps portal and do a refresh in here. I can see that Dataverse customer appearing in here as well. Let me do a modify to this customer record. It says test customer 1, and I go to Power Apps portal and do a refresh, and it appears in the other side as well. So that works fine. Let me quickly delete the record from the Business Central side and see whether it's going to work or not. I'm going back to Power Apps portal and do a refresh. That record should go away. Yep, it works fine as well. So now we saw that it works for new record. What about the old record? Let me modify this old record. Rename the customer, rename the description, and then refresh data in here. And you can see the description got changed in the Dataverse side as well. So that works perfectly well. And you might be wondering that all this time I was just working with the one column. So what about the other columns? And if you go to that filter view and then select the all columns, you will see all the columns available within the API. So let's take this record and let's change the address line too for the last customer record we have. Let me put Auckland in here. And then sell record and go and refresh it. It changed it to Auckland. So even for the other fields, it works fine. And you have noticed that I have done all of these, modify, delete, insert from both the sides without writing a single line of code. And just by deploying one solution from Microsoft and then doing some small configurations.
Thanks, Tharanga. That's also quite interesting. And just reminding everyone that we have the Q&A session after that. So if you have any questions about the demo or anything that we discussed so far or we're still going to discuss, just keep sending the questions or lining up your questions, and you're going to be doing Q&A after that. Okay? But we know that not all scenarios are going to support virtual entities. We discussed before that you might have trouble if you needed the information on Dataverse for dashboard and reports, or if you needed to keep a better tracking of that information, what was changed in each one of these systems. And maybe you can live without that very fast real-time synchronization. So what are the alternatives if virtual entities doesn't work for you? So let's talk about some of those alternatives, right? The first one is the standard connector. When you would be using the standard connector, usually when you have like non-real-time scenarios, so if I don't need to integrate the systems in close to real time, if the scheduler integration is good enough for me, then the standard connector is a really good solution. And I'm pretty sure that right now the minimum recurrence is about 1 minute, right, Tharanga?
Yeah, that's correct, because it's running through job queues. Yeah.
Yeah. So if 1 minute delay between the changes on your systems is good enough for you, then you should be able to use the standard connector, right? And because there is actually data replication, those are the another use case where you can use the standard connector when the data must exist on both systems, right? Remember that we talked before on virtual entities. All of those changes, although was being happening in Dataverse, was always saved into BC, right? So the data only existed on BC, was exposed through an API into Dataverse. The other places that you can use a standard connector is if you have the same local currency. If you have that and the company that you're using and the entities that you're using on the other system has the same local currency, then you should be able to use the standard connector. And finally, because the data exists in both systems, if you need the Dataverse to have charts and dashboards enabled using that entity, then you can use the standard connector, right? And finally, if data auditing is also required. But the standard connector has some limitations, right? And the limitations here, let's talk about some of them. The first one, which is not as much as a limitation, but a change from what we see on Dataverse. Any mapping actually requires code changes. You see that everything that we did on virtual tables or virtual entities was basically configuration driven. In here, if you needed to make any changes on mapping or if you needed to map new entities, you're going to require to make a code change, and that code change must be deployed. The second one is if you have different currencies in companies and you're trying to connect the entity to different companies on BC, then you're going to have a problem with standard connector because standard connector is not be able to do that. Finally, you have some predetermined out-of-the-box entities that you can use straight away with some predetermined mappings. If you needed to add other entities that are not from that out-of-the-box list, or if you needed to change or add more or remove some of the fields, that counts as the item one that you're talking about, is a new mapping, and because of that, is going to require code changes. It's not that it's not possible, it's just that you have to do some work for that. And probably the biggest limitation here on standard connector, or the biggest drawback on that, is the merge conflicts are always manually resolved, right? So from what I understand, we have much better now notification from the old versions of the standard connector when a merge conflict happens, but you would be able to, you needed to still manually interfere on that, right? So the idea here is the data is going to be synchronized in two ways, or you choose the direction, but you can do it two ways. And if you have any kind of merge conflicts, if you change it on one system and before that synchronization happens, a change in the other system as well, then you have to manually resolve those conflicts. What we do when virtual entities is not a good solution because it hits some of those design constraints, and standard connector also is not a good option because it hits some of those constraints. Then the next option for that would be the enterprise integration. Some of the scenarios that we used enterprise integration on the past, and I would recommend in using that. First one is I have real-time synchronization, but I only wanted to integrate when I have certain conditions. For example, I have a customer, but I don't want the customer to go back to BC or go back to Dataverse, depending on what direction you want, until that customer moves from a draft into a active user, right? And after I change it to inactive or deleted, I don't want anything to occur anymore. So that real-time synchronization with conditions is something that enterprise integration can give it to you, but it's not something that you would be able to do it on the other options. Or if I have complex mapping or complex logic, for example, I actually having to get a couple of entities and merge into one, or I have to do like transformations between a set of values that I have on BC versus a set of values that I have on Dataverse, right? That kind of transformation on the fly is something that enterprise integration can give it to you versus the things that you had there. The other place that you would be using enterprise integration a lot would be the cases where you have two-way synchronization with some kind of circuit breaker. For example, what would happen is if I change it on BC, that synchronized into Dataverse, because that synchronized into Dataverse, that constitutes a change it, then it tries to push it back on BC. If I have like that two-way integration, how do I break that infinite loop, right? Inside, because we have that ability to do the filters that we talked in the beginning, we can create a circuit breaker. For example, don't update, don't trigger anything if the user that makes the changes as the service account use it for enterprise integration. Then finally, the other place where you're using enterprise integration a lot is when you're having some kind of multicasting. Now, I not only have BC and Dataverse working, but the data that goes from Dataverse to BC also should go to other places. Why do I need to create like 3 different point-to-point integrations when enterprise integration give me the way to like multicast that to any of the systems and treat each one of those integrations as its own integration with its own set of logic? Right? So those are the places where you'd be using enterprise integration. But what is enterprise integration in this case? What is the options for me inside Microsoft, inside Power Platform to create what we call in this enterprise integration? The first option is it's something that most of you is going to be like quite familiar with, right? Inside Power Platform itself, you have the component for running workflows that can act as that enterprise integration option. That is the Power Automate, right? So you can do pretty much everything that we discussed there using Power Automate. Potentially, the only one that you wouldn't be able to do would be the last scenario around multicasting, right? But most of the other things you should be able to use with Power Automate. The other option that you have is the Azure Integration Services. And then I'm talking here Logic Apps as the exact sibling of Power Automate. But inside Azure Integration Services, then you have a set of other components like the messaging engines as Azure Service Bus and Azure Event Grid, and the API management or API proxy that is the API management. So you can combine all those services to create that enterprise integration layer and do that two-way synchronization close to real time, similar to what you would have with virtual entities, but removing some of those limitations that we have there. So I think that's what we have to talk today, Tharanga. But I think you have a set of references if people want to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. And if you are interested on learning about new stuff, and especially regarding the virtual entities and how the integration is being set up, the best place to go is to Microsoft Docs. And if you search for Business Central Database Connected, and you will find like a lot of reference from the Microsoft, and it has like all the guides, code samples, and what are the events you need to work with. All the information is there, and these are the couple of links that we have in there. And Wagner, if you can go to next slide,
Yes.
we can talk about information. So we have our Twitter account and our personal email addresses. So if you have any questions regarding the any issues regarding integrations, just send us a tweet or send us an email. Then we'll be more than happy to help you guys. And finally, thank you for DynamicsCon organizing team for letting us present in the conference, and it was really great. And hope to talk to you guys really soon after this slide on the Q&A.
Yes, and I would like to extend my thanks as well to the DynamicsCon organization. It was our first time, and hopefully it was something that was interesting. And remember that we're going to be here for the next 5 or so minutes to ask questions. But if you have any burning questions and you're not able to do that during this time, just send us a message on Twitter or the emails. And with that, I think we have a wrap.
Okay, thank you.
And it seems like we're live.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. We see there was a lot of other questions. Hopefully, we answer some of them in the chat. But we try to go through the questions that we find there in order and see how many of those we can tackle here today. So let's start with Miguel Salva. And is a question for you, Tharanga. He's asking, do you think Business Central will someday use the common data model or the Dataverse as the data source, just like the 365 and others are using today?
Yep. I highly doubt that BC will go into common data service or that model. And I think we have discussed this like in a couple of other conferences as well. Like I don't see that Microsoft is like moving BC into that area. But you never know. Microsoft will come tomorrow and say, "Oh, we are moving BC into that area." You never know.
Okay, thanks, Tharanga. So the next one is from Jonathan, and he asks, I see a need to enrich data on prospects and customers, for example. This will require me to have the 365 sales to feed in the same data, a separate marketing automation app that will feed all the data, and I need Dataverse to hold the extra details from all of those things. So is that possible today with Dataverse, right? And then I think later on he has a follow-up question is, should I be doing like a prospect table and a customer table? From what I see, and not the D365 expert, I'm the integration guy on the basement, the pizza, etc. But what we see on that is that you probably would be able to have the prospect table, and on the point where the prospect table becomes a customer, move that into that customer table, and from there have that integration that you're talking with Dataverse. So you wouldn't have like all the data being synchronized with BC, right? But you would have just the data that you really need. And I think that's one of the approaches that we're using today on one of our projects, right? At Tharanga. We only moving the client into BC, only doing the integration into BC when the client have his first transaction.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, Jonathan, hoping that that answered the question. Let me see which next one. Okay, so the next one is from. Just let me find the person. I think it's from Greg. If it's not from Greg, sorry that I didn't get the full name. So can you do the same connection to show virtual tables if BC is on-prem and Dataverse is, of course, on MS Cloud?
I haven't tried this one, but I doubt that will work. The normal integration works, the normal connector works with the on-prem version, but I haven't tried the Dataverse
Mhm.
virtual entities.
Yeah.
So
Well, I saw later on the chat that Waldo said that, well, I don't know if it answered your question, but we have a default Dataverse set up with an on-prem environment. So at least that works.
yes,
So there is a potential that works, but doesn't seem like to have much on the documentation about that, right?
yep. I even tried to search in the Microsoft Docs, and it doesn't have anything on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
What will be the next one? I think is from Waldo. So whenever I see something from Power Suite, I don't really question the usefulness of the product, like the app source, but I do wonder the deployability and the maintainability of it. Auto deploy using DevOps packages. Any tips on that? So the project that we're working right now, me and Tharanga and the other people on Tita, we have 3 different Power Apps working with each one of them with its own mini domain with some
yeah,
base data. So we managed to do segmentation, application segmentation on that. So we have like a base solution that we deploy. And then after that, we have in each one of the applications using that base solution that has the core. And on top of that, that integration with BC. And
yeah,
all of this today, while we're using the guidance from the Center of Excellence, the Power Apps Center of Excellence, and managing to do all that deployment using DevOps. So the difference here is usually when you're doing like proper code, when you're doing like the default code, you have the ability to simply commit into the source code, the source control, and from there trigger your builds, right? On that case, it's more like we have point in times when you know that application is ready and we trigger the build as a two-step process. The first one is getting the unmanaged solution into source control. And the second one is unpack that with on an environment that has any other dependencies. So load the dependencies, load the managed solution, then package as a managed solution so you can push to other environments. But we were able to automate all of that. So hope that helps. Okay, so what is the next one? Well, there is one here from Ryan. With enterprise integration using Power Platform, is this using Power Platform connector with the API? I'm confusing about what enterprise integration is practically speaking. So on that particular case, Ryan, when you're talking about enterprise integration, is we're working mainly with the triggering something from Dataverse, like based on a create, update, delete, like on one of the events, and using either Power Automate or Logic Apps to integrate it with BC. And in this case, we are actually integrating with the BC APIs. In our particular case, because we don't want to expose the BC APIs to everything, we also have a little layer there with the API management. So yes, we're using, in this particular case, we're using Power Apps, Power Automate as the workflow engine, but
yep.
we're using the BC APIs behind the scenes. And Tharanga, maybe you can talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you what you said. We using the Logic App and the Power Automate for the orchestration of the integration, and then using the standard BC APIs and the custom APIs, and to give better security, we are using API management. So that's the setup for a couple of other projects, and for the other projects, we are using directly the Dataverse integration as well.
Okay. There's another one from Mohammed. We still have like 4 minutes or so left. In case we need some custom entities to be used from BC, do we need extra license?
For the custom entities, no, I don't think so. You need any extra license for that.
Okay. Just see if there is any. We can use field and one from Hiba. Hopefully, I got that right. We can use filters when using virtual tables. For example, account would go to customer or vendor based on relationship type. Can we do that? I think it's when we're using virtual entities, it's like one because you're actually not doing necessarily an integration, and that's probably the trick here. When you're using virtual entities, you're exposing that entity to Dataverse instead of actually moving data. For what you're looking here, probably what we would be needed to use there is that third option that would be the enterprise integration. And in this case, you're actually doing data replication or data synchronization versus just exposing the entity from BC into Dataverse.
Yeah, either the enterprise integration or you can go with standard connector as well, which
Mm-hmm.
allows you to replicate the data from the host systems.
Cool. Okay, so doesn't seems like there is any other questions. No, seems like we got a lot of questions. So thanks for that, everyone, because it's really good to have that amount of questions. At least shows
Yep.
that the topic was interesting. And thank you very much for staying with us. Thanks for the organization. It was our first time, and we really enjoy it. And I just saw one last request to put all the three links on the chat. So doing that now, as soon as we finish that.
Yep. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining. It was like really nice. And as Wagner said, this is our first time, and we really did enjoy this session. Thank you.